Greetings, Uncle Travelling Matt here. It is my final day, the 15th day of my trip, and I am in the old city of Jerusalem. I've got most of the day today. My flight leaves at 8, so I need to be at the airport in Tel Aviv by about 6. And there are trains now, there are high-speed trains, I believe, that take half an hour to get there. It used to be about an hour and a half or 3 hours if you took the old train. So times have changed. So yes, I've got most of the day here. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to visit some of the sites, some of my favourite sites in the old city, and then if there's time I'll go to the Israel Museum, but I probably won't. Just I don't think the time's going to be there. Here we are again. I'm by King David's Citadel in the Christian quarter of the old city. And I'm going to be going that way now to the least visited of the four quarters, the Armenian Quarter. I want to check out the Cathedral of St. James. Let's go. We are in the least known and least visited of Jerusalem's four quarters. It's the Armenian Quarter. The other three quarters are the Arab Quarter, which is the biggest and the busiest, and then the Christian Quarter and the Jewish Quarter. And you might wonder, well, what are the Armenians doing having a quarter here? Well, a lot of them moved here after the Armenian genocide. They moved to various places in the Middle East. I saw some of them in Lebanon, but some moved here. But they actually were only supplementing a much older presence, because the Armenian church is actually the oldest in the world. They were the first country to convert to Christianity, and they have their own church, which is a pre-Chalcedon church, and it's unique in the world. And I have to say that, well, as remembering the genocide, I first came across them here in Jerusalem. I never really knew anything about them apart from they were part of the old Soviet Union, and it piqued an interest. Later, when I was in Bulgaria, I taught Armenian students, and they got me more interested in it, and it's an interest that continues to this day. And I've since travelled to Armenia, and also the lands that the Armenians used to live in, and then were, well, basically ethnically cleansed from in Turkey. But now we are in the heart of the Armenian Quarter, and this is the Cathedral Church of St. James. So let's have a look. The Armenians are extremely famous for are these beautifully carved stones. They're called khachkas, and they are made out of this particular type of rock. It's a volcanic rock, as you can see. Beautiful, deep red, sandy colour, and that's the rock tufa, it's called, or that's the rock that you find in and around Yerevan. And their carving is absolutely unbelievable. Look at the detail in that. And they're actually fields with hundreds of these in Armenia. And there's another one over there. Their main saint, and this, I don't know if this is him, but is St. Gregory the Illuminator. He's the guy who converted Armenia, and his shrine is at Khoverap, which I visited in the shadow of Mount Ararat, the holy mountain. This here is the cathedral itself. Let's see if we can get in. Unfortunately, it's not possible to get in at the moment. I have been before. It's quite a mystical church. It's a shame, because I would have liked to show you the inside of that. But it is the Cathedral of St. James because it's meant to be where St. James is buried, which of course leads us with a problem, because those who know me know that I'm doing the Camino pilgrimage, which is to the shrine of St. James, which is where he's buried. So he can't be buried in two places, so one of them must be wrong. Unless it's two St. James's, could be. But yes, I guess the fact that when I get to Santiago and the fact I've been here means I will have seen the shrine of St. James, We're just not sure which is the real one. Anyway, this is the Armenian Cathedral of St. James. So I'm now at what is probably my favourite church in the world. This is the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Sepulchre means tomb. It's the church where not only is the cross on which Christ died on, is that located in here, but also Christ's tomb. So it is the holiest place in the world if you're a Christian. But that's not the only reason why it's my favourite. It's my favourite because it's also, I believe, the most fascinating because of all the extra little bits to it. There's loads and loads to see. There's loads of little stories. For example, have a look at that ladder up there. There's an argument between the different churches that administer it. There's about 5 churches that administer it. And they put that ladder up there about 150 years ago, and nobody's decided whose job it is to take it down. So that's the kind of stuff we're dealing with here. So anyway, let's have a look inside and see some of the different bits. We're going in the main entrance. We're going to go through here. And what we have here is a beautiful little Coptic chapel. As I said before, the Copts are the main church in Ethiopia, Eritrea and Egypt. Let's go up here. I'm now on the roof of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. This is a dome underneath there is the church, and this is actually a monastery of Coptic monks. So we had those 2 Coptic chapels before. There's obviously Crusader structures here at some time, and it's now a monastery of Coptic monks. And it's amazing. It's like a little bit of Africa in the middle of Jerusalem. Have a look here.
طب يلا بس خلاص ما تجيبش حاجه.
My favourite part of the Holy Sepulchre is here. So we're on the roof, we're in the St. Helens Coptic Chapel, and there's this tiny stairway that goes down. So we'll climb down the stairs, and then we're going under the church itself, and look at this. And here we are, under the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. There is this underground lake. It's actually a cistern. It's called St. Helena's cistern. St. Helena is very important here. She was the mother of the Emperor Constantine. She was a Christian. Contrary to popular belief, he wasn't. He only got baptized on his deathbed. But she made the pilgrimage to Jerusalem, and while she was there, it was her who worked out that under a particular Roman temple was obviously going to be the place where Christ had been crucified, where he was buried. So she dug about and she found the cross. and the finding of the true cross it's a festival in the Christian calendar. It's very, very revered in the Eastern churches, and so St. Helena has a huge role to play in this church, and this cistern was named after it. Now, what it's doing here is obviously cities like Jerusalem struggled to get a water supply, and so there were a number of these cisterns, and I suppose there still are, underneath the city, and this is what supplied it with drinking water. This is St. Helena's cistern. Okay, we're back at the main entrance now, and let's see about what we can find down this side entrance. This is St. Jacob's Orthodox Cathedral. So this beautiful little church here, as we can see, it's under the main tower, is an Orthodox chapel. And the Orthodox churches, we always recognise some of the iconstases, often using Greek. So as we have a look there, Jesus is I-S, Exus, Jesus Christos. Plenty of icons, great stuff. And next to that chapel is this gorgeous one, and look at the detail on the iconstasis. The carving is absolutely incredible. Now, this is Orthodox as well, but there seems to be a bit of a St. George theme to this one, so I'm guessing it's dedicated to him. And now we are finally ready to enter the church itself. So let's go through the main doors and we'll see some of the most important stuff. So first up, the first thing we encounter as we go through here is this stone, and it's very aromatic. There's a lot of incense on it, and this is the stone that it is believed that Christ was laid down on after his crucifixion, that his body was laid on after the crucifixion. There's a large picture of it, you see, and that is because just over here is Calvary, the spot where the cross once stood. So let's go to Calvary. So here we are. This is the spot, it is believed, where Christ was crucified. And that is what those pilgrims are kissing. We're now under Calvary, and I think, I'm not sure because there's no explanation, but I think this spot is important because it is Christian tradition that Christ was crucified on top of the grave of Adam, because Adam committed the original sin, and therefore Christ absolved that original sin, you see. And the place, of course, where he was crucified is called Golgotha, place of the skull. And of course, whose skull would it be but Adam's? So that is what that is. There's the side bit of Golgotha. There are these side chapels all around, and they belong to different churches. I'm not even sure which one this is, what that writing is. I ain't got a clue, to be honest. It might be Syriac, and obviously that pillar's important. But what I'm going to do is go down here. So I'm now in the Armenian chapel of St. Helena. Remember, I said the Armenians are the oldest church in the world. So this is a chapel commemorating St. Helena, who found the true cross. And it's, look at the Armenian writing and the imagery. I really like these panels at the side. You see, there's one. There's a vision of a holy city there, and I think they are depicting images from Armenian Christian history. So I'm guessing that's St. Gregory the Illuminator. And there he is baptizing the king of Armenia, who actually persecuted him for 20 years and put him in a tomb in Horvarap. Well, not a tomb, a prison underneath Horvarap. And there we are. So this is the evangelization of Armenia. Amen. Going down further from the Armenian church into this one. So we're actually quite near the cistern. It's probably just underneath here. And this simple space is also dedicated to Saint Helena because this is where she found the cross. So this is where she found the true cross, you see. And there she is. And I'm guessing because it's a statue, this is a Catholic administered part of the church. We're back up are in the main part of the church. There is another side chapel. That one's an Armenian one. Now this is another side chapel. This is an Orthodox one. And there's the Roman off eagle, you see. And this one's actually been done up since I last came. This was all a bit derelict before, but this is quite pleasant now. Another beautiful little intimate space, and I like churches like that. Those closed doors are the Catholic church. I've actually been to Mass in there. I'm guessing they're shut because there's a Mass in. Let's have a look. Yeah, it looks like, but they're not important. That's quite a modern part of the church, and it's strange that the Catholics, the biggest church in the world, have only got such a small part of this. But this is the bit that really matters. So here we have possibly the holiest spot in the world. This is the tomb of Christ. We've got a big line of pilgrims wanting to go in. You go in, there's a small chamber there, and then the very small chamber of the tomb itself further in. I've been in a few times. And it's all under this magnificent dome. So the centre of the church is this magnificent Orthodox church. And I'm guessing it's a cathedral, I don't know. And I've never been in here before because it's always been shut. One thing I will say that's noticeable now compared with my previous visits is the changing nature of the pilgrims. So the first time I came there was a lot of Westerners there. Now we've got so many Orthodox pilgrims, so many Russians, Romanians. They didn't have the money or the ability to travel before, and yet these days they're coming here in droves. And also, as we can see in front of us, a lot from the Far East. So I'm down at the other side of the shrine now, and this is quite interesting. This building here is actually a tent, and it's a Coptic tent. And it's been there for about 500 years. They attached a tent onto the back of the main shrine 500 years ago, and it's still there. And now this Armenian shrine is, I think, dedicated to, I think it's Armenian, or is it Syriac or Coptic, who knows? I think that one's Armenian, and it's dedicated to where the women stood and watched Christ as he was crucified, and they wept, or maybe when they wept at the tomb, considering where it is, probably where they wept at the tomb. That's the end of my tour of the Holy Sepulchre. Just one little thing, this building here, there with the large minaret, is the Mosque of Caliph Omar, and that's important because obviously the Muslims regard Jesus as a prophet, and they haven't quite worked out his divinity yet, but they do regard him as a prophet. And so when Caliph Omar came to Jerusalem and he conquered it, the legend says that rather than going and praying in the church of the Holy Sepulchre, he prayed outside because he didn't want his followers to knock it down and build a mosque there. And so there is a mosque, but it's next door. I think that's such a lovely story, and I have to say that of the Muslim caliphs, Omar's probably my favourite, partly for that, but he just seemed to be quite a tolerant and likeable chap. So yeah, that is the Omar Mosque. And talking of mosques, I think I'm going to head on now to a rather more famous one. Entering another of Jerusalem's quarters, the Jewish quarter, which is pretty obviously signposted by all the Israeli flags everywhere. This is the Cardo. This is, remember I talked in Jerash and Untitled about the Roman cities being on a cruciform shape. Well, this is one of the major roads, and after the temple was destroyed and Jerusalem was leveled by the Romans, it was rebuilt as a typical Roman city, and this is one of the main streets. This picture shows what the Cardo would have looked like in Roman times. Remember those colonnaded streets in Jerash? Much the same. They're the columns, but what I like is this. On this side we have pictures of what would have been going on in different stores. So there's that one's, I think, the jewellery store and a musical instrument store, and then this one is a glassware store. That's quite a cool bit of artwork. Now in the heart of the Jewish quarter, and this big building up here, which looks a bit like a mosque, is not a mosque. It's the Hova Synagogue. It's the probably the most recognisable Jewish landmark in the city. Now you may have noticed that the Jewish quarter looks a lot more modern. It does, that's why it's probably my least favourite quarter. It doesn't have that feeling of time about it as the others, but that's not their fault. It's the fault of the Six-Day War, because the Jordanians held Jerusalem during the Six-Day War, and there was a fierce battle to get into the old city, and a lot of the Jewish quarter was destroyed by the Jordanian army. So that's why a lot of it's modern. But here we are, this is the Jewish quarter. And we've got all these soldiers there. Look at that. Okay, so here's one of the most famous views of Jerusalem. That there is the Kotel, the Western Wall, or the Wailing Wall. That is the holiest site of Judaism. It was the retaining wall for the ancient temple. The temple sat on top of there, where is now the Golden Dome, the Dome of the Rock. And Jews go there to lament the loss of the temple and pray for it to be rebuilt again. At the moment we're going to struggle to rebuild it because of that, and also that, which is the Al-Aqsa Mosque on there. That's where I'm headed now. Apparently it opens at 12:30, so it's about 25 past now, so it should be okay. So I'm now going up over the Wailing Wall and into the Temple Mount, which is where the temple once stood, where we now found the Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Dome of the Rock. So, let's go. So, this is the Al-Aqsa Mosque. It's the third holiest site in Islam. It means the farthest mosque, and Islamic tradition says that it was from this mosque that Muhammad travelled. Well, he travelled to here on the night flight from Mecca, and this is a bit of a weird event. It's something where it seems that almost in the blink of an eye he travelled on a winged horse from Mecca all the way to Jerusalem. Al-Aqsa means the furthest mosque, and he then ascended up through the heavens and spoke with Moses and had various discussions, one of them being working out how many times a day Muslims should pray. Now, the building itself is Umayyad, I believe. Some people say it's based on a Christian church. That could be a church, to be fair, to look at it. But then a church would have faced east, so it probably isn't. It probably was built as a mosque. Let's see if I can find a bit more about the history and go inside. Okay, it seems like we're not allowed in there now. It used to be. But here's actually the main thing that I've come to see. One of the most beautiful buildings in the world. This is the Dome of the Rock. Also one of the earliest Islamic buildings in the world. Umayyad. Let's have a look. See if I can get in this one. Interesting that lady's praying in the direction she's praying in suggests that the Al-Aqsa Mosque may be a Petra Mosque, which would fit in with the idea of being very early. Next to the Dome of the Rock, there's this gorgeous little tiled pavilion, absolutely exquisite. And if you look, they've recycled the columns because the capitals of each one is different. Now, this one has a mihrab and with the Qibla niche, and one of the arguments that Gibson uses in that you know, for it being Petra and not Mecca, is that the Dome of the Rock does not have a Qibla, and it was a mosque built without a Qibla. Now, this is very interesting, and what he was saying is that that period, and that was the time of the in-between Qiblas, that even Qiblas weren't seen as that important, and so you could build a building there. It was all in flux. The religion itself hadn't kind of solidified into what it is today. Now, I've read some marvelous, some very interesting works on this building here. One of them, and it is basically follows the kind of Tom Holland argument that says that basically the original Muslims weren't Muslim. They were what were called believers. They were monotheists, and Muhammad was their prophet. But they weren't Muslims as we know today. And when they came and invaded Jerusalem, so that's Caliph Omar, whose mosque we saw earlier, they were actually referred to as the believers by the inhabitants of the city that wrote this stuff down. And they also the coins that they issued were like Byzantine coins, and they even had crosses on. And it wasn't until our old friend, and I forgot his name, Ibn Tayyib, I think, Ibn Zubayr, who moved the Kaaba, that the Shahada was put on the coinage, which suggests that their beliefs are different. But this building is basically the first one to proclaim this new faith when they kind of worked out what it was. And the writing all around the top, if we can see up there, that is all declaration of faith stuff, and it's all very much anti-Trinitarian, and it's about the oneness of God. And this was the first positive declaration of this new Islamic identity in that most holy of cities, the holy city of the Christians and Jews, and particularly at that time the Christians who held all the power. And the idea was, by plonking this temple here, they would, say, look, we've got a rival to the Holy Sepulchre. And of course it's in the place where the original temple was. At the time, this was a rubbish dump, and the legends say that Omar was so unimpressed with this that he took the Greek patriarch and made him, I think he dragged him through the rubbish on the Temple Mount in shame for what he'd done to the holiest site in the city, and possibly even in the world, you could say. So this was the new rival. This is the new kid on the block, as it were. And architecturally, though, it's not that new. It's quite Byzantine, except for, of course, all the tile work. But, the idea of dome and columns, it's a very Byzantine design. And but it is absolutely exquisite. And it's not even that big. I mean, it's only slightly bigger than our village parish church, and yet it has such an incredible presence. And of course it still does today. Interestingly, in Christian history, it's played a role, because when the Crusaders came here, a lot of them mistakenly thought this was the Jewish temple, because it's an old building on the Temple Mount. And so the Templars churches are all circular in shape, in memory of this building, which of course was never the temple in the first place. So that's an interesting point in how it's affected history. It is one of the most iconic and one of the most exquisitely beautiful buildings on the planet. I don't think I'm allowed in. I'm going to go and try, but even so, just walking around the outside is honour enough. And I did go in when I was young, so I can't complain too much. So I'm not allowed in, which is kind of what I suspected. The rules have changed. You used to be allowed to go in both buildings, and I did when I was younger. So I'm glad I've been in, because that one in particular is exquisitely beautiful inside. I don't remember Al-Aqsa being anything particularly special, but that one is worth seeing. And in the centre of it is the rock, because it's the dome of the rock. And that is the rock that, according to Muslims, and I think the Jews, Abraham went to sacrifice Isaac. Of course, the Samaritans think differently. They would say it's on Mount Gerizim. There's a rock there, and of course, actually, the Muslims think it was Ishmael, not Isaac. But the rock is there, and it is also the rock from which Muhammad is said to have ascended to heaven. It is worth talking about access to the Temple Mount. Anybody is allowed on at certain times, but there is a big notice as you go in telling Jews that they are not allowed, and that is not the Muslims stopping them, that is their own rabbinic rabbinical authorities, because the site is so holy. You were not allowed to enter the Holy of Holies in the days of the temple, and since they don't know where that was, they've declared that the whole site is the Holy of Holies, and they can't go on it at the moment until, of course, the temple is rebuilt, which leads me on to, should the temple be rebuilt? Now, there is quite a large movement, probably a growing movement in Judaism, that wants to rebuild the temple. Obviously, there are issues to that building over there being one of them, and the Al-Aqsa being the other, and the anger of over 1 billion Muslims, I think. But what do I think? Should the temple be rebuilt? Well, I'm a bit torn. Part of me says yes, because this is the temple, it's a special place, it's the holiest place of the Jews, and I think it would be magnificent if it was rebuilt. But then the other half is it worth pissing off half the world? And what do you do with this exquisite architectural gem? I mean, I suppose the answer is you take it down piece by piece and reassemble it somewhere else. But that's still, a bit, architecturally there's nothing wrong with that. It's preserved. But that still, I don't think, would curb the anger of 1 billion. And I think it's that anger of 1 billion, which means that it would never happen. But you never know, if there's another war or something, and certain extremists manage to blow this up, well, yes, the temple could be rebuilt. And there are plenty of Christians, by the way, who would be very happy to see it rebuilt as well. So it's not just the Jews. I must admit, I am a bit angry that I'm not allowed in. But then I suppose, if anything, that reflects well on Christianity, because there are Muslims in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. They even hold the keys to it, and I think that openness and tolerance is fantastic, and maybe it should be a lesson to others sometimes. Going back to the Gibson theory, I mean, his works are slightly different than Tom Holland. He believes Islam was a fully formed religion in the time of Muhammad. They just got the place wrong. And of course, what he would say is the Al-Aqsa is not over there in Jerusalem. That the Al-Aqsa, the farthest mosque, was actually Moses' spring on the edge of Petra. And then, of course, it would make sense that in a single night Muhammad could go there on a horse, winged or otherwise, and that's where he would ascend to heaven from, because it was very near Petra. It was the farthest mosque. It was there, and it is said that it's by a riverside, it's by a spring. So this one very clearly isn't, and it's in a valley, which this one clearly isn't. So there's probably, as with a lot of Gibson's theories, a lot of evidence to back him up. Anyway. Whether it's the real site or not, it is beautiful. It's been great to be here, and this is me, I think, from the old city. Now I'm going to check what the time is. If I've got time, I'll go to the Israel Museum. If not, I'm just going to make my way to the airport and conclude my trip. So there we are, the Dome of the Rock. So I've left the old town behind now. I am going to just make my way to the airport. I've got plenty of time to spare, I've got hours to spare, but I've got things I need to catch up on, and to be quite frank, I think my brain just can't take any more culture. What I'm doing here is I'm pointing out a few changes. So I'm now in the very Jewish bit of West Jerusalem. This is the new part of the city, and you can see there we've got guys doing religious stuff on the the street, saw them in Beersheba bus station. Everybody here does seem to be quite religious, a lot more so than in the rest of Israel. You know, you saw these girls with the 3/4 length skirts and the guys wearing black. It's noticeable. A lot of changes since I lived in Israel. One of them is this. I've just come on the tram, and there's a new tram system in Jerusalem. And that makes getting around a lot easier. It was very, very crowded. But the other thing is this: there is a brand new railway line to Jerusalem. There was one before, but it went all around the Wrekin and took about 2.5 hours to get there. This has been specially engineered. It cuts straight through, and you can get to the airport in half an hour, they reckon, on this, which is pretty amazing. A little controversial because apparently it goes through a bit of the West Bank as well. But anyway, this is the new Jerusalem Central Station. Let's take the train. So this place is really deep underground. The third set of escalators here, and look at these doors. It reminds me of the Pyongyang Metro, and of course in Pyongyang the station doubles as a bomb shelter. Is that the case here? Who's Nama? Very Pyongyang. And here we are for the fourth underground escalator. There was also 2 more on top. So a total of 6 escalators to get to the platforms. Here's my train. It's a double-decker one. As you can see, that doesn't surprise me because I actually took the same train when I went from the airport to Beersheba before, and then also, well, from the airport to Tel Aviv and then the airport to Beersheba. Let's settle down for the ride. So, it's Uncle Travelling Matt here, and it's the end of my trip to Jordan and Israel, and I thought I'd say a few words to sum it all up. I'm at the airport now, waiting for my flight. It's only an hour's time, and I thought I'd pop into the prayer room, because they're normally a place of quiet and reflection, and of course particularly apt, considering where I am in the world. So I reflected on Jordan before, so I'm not really going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about my few days spent in Israel and of course the West Bank. I suppose the biggest thing I've got from it is I've actually seen a lot more of the Palestinian territories than I've seen before. I have, of course, been in the West Bank before. I've been to Bethlehem and also Hebron, but going to Ramallah and particularly Nablus and having a really good look around Nablus, and then going up out to Mount Gerizim, which was an incredible experience, even if the very peak of the mountain was closed, was something that I'm really glad I did. And I'd like to go back one day, perhaps when they have a festival, to see what that's like. But I think going on a Shabbat, although I kind of didn't realise I was doing that, what meant that I could talk to the people and in a relaxed environment, which was nice. Again, by chance, the Airbnb, which I just booked somewhere near Jerusalem, and I got somewhere in the West Bank. What a lovely family. The mother, whose name was Swab, really, really interesting, excellent English. She used to be, well, she still is an RE teacher. And so I talked about how they teach RE here as compared with in Britain. And the dad was an interesting Charlie. He was a nice fellow as well. And being able to share their Sunday lunch with him was fantastic. Apart from that, what have I actually done? Well, I've gone around the holy sites, and the fact is a lot of those I'd been to before, but I think a trip to Jerusalem should be a bit of a pilgrimage, and it's one of those cities you could just wander around time and time again and always see something new, and there's some amazing churches there. Absolutely unbelievable, and the amount of history that you've got is just unparalleled, and you can't take it in after a while. And that's why I didn't go to the Israel Museum, because I'd got to the point that I couldn't actually take in any more cultural history. So that's something for next time, and I will be coming back again. Israel's changed a lot since I lived there. I don't know. Before it seemed, when I came in 2009, it seemed more aggressive and unhappy. Now that seems to have been normalised a bit. The whole settlement thing's normalised. The wall seems more normalised. And whether something like that should ever be normalised, I don't know, but it does seem to have been normalised. The Palestinians are not happy, but they're more, I'd say they've normalised it all a lot more. And I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing. We normalise things because it's a coping mechanism. That's what humans do, that's how they cope. But at the same time, some things perhaps shouldn't be normalised. I think the diversity in Israel is fantastic. It always has been. I suppose the big change is the travellers that are coming now. When I was there, so many Europeans, they're not here these days. The Europeans, and indeed there's a friend of mine, and when I said, you ought to come to Israel, you love it, he's like, no, I won't go there because of the government. And so many Europeans have turned against Israel for perhaps understandable reasons, but in their place have come the South Americans, the Filipinos, the Chinese, the South Koreans, and there's a different kind of tourist that's there before, and it's part of this revolution that's happened in my lifetime. When I started travelling, basically Europeans and Americans and Australians and New Zealanders travelled, and the occasional Japanese in groups. Now the middle classes of the entire world are doing it. The Russians are there in big numbers, the South Americans. I've even seen African groups, which you would never have got before. And A few years ago, I read a book called The Rise of the Rest, and I think that's what's happening. You know, it's not that Europe and America are diminishing, but the others are catching up in a way, and that's going to give us a whole new world. And I think that will give Israel a new world because Israel's relied on America, and when America isn't the preeminent force, I don't know quite what will happen. But at the moment, Israel looks very secure in itself, and it seems to be doing well. Yes, the Ethiopian Israelis are far more noticeable now, and in the army, they seem to be taking far more of a part in society. The older ones still perhaps doing the menial jobs, but the young ones more integrated than they were. So maybe Israel's less racist, as I suppose a lot of the world is. Downsides, obviously not being able to go into the Al-Aqsa and Dome of the Rock. I mean, I do wonder and I saying the Muslims like they're one block and they're not. This is obviously some decision that's been taken on a local level, but really, if you want people to respect your religion more and you want people to be more tolerant and be more opening, then you have to do it the other way. And to put this ban on interested outsiders from going in is just stupid. Just the same as the whole Mecca Medina ban is ridiculous. It's grow up, really. Just grow up. Nobody else does it. The Hindus don't do it. Sikhs don't do it. The Buddhists don't do it. And the Jews don't do it. I prayed at the Wailing Wall. And the Christians don't do it, so just grow up. Really. That's and I wish I didn't have to say that because there's so much about Muslim culture that I think is amazing. But this whole kind of particularism, like you're splitting people off, no, I don't agree with that. But yeah, that's about that really. I had a lot of hassle at the airport again. Kind of expected it. Put extra time in to cover it. But that's my time in the sun. I've really enjoyed it. I just can't wait to come back and see more. And for a country the size of Wales, that's pretty amazing. Anyway, that's all for me. Hope you've enjoyed all my videos. Hope they've inspired you to read up more, to discover more, and perhaps to come here yourself one day. In the meantime, keep travelling.